Friendship, one of the most powerful bonds in human existence. We trust our friends with our secrets, our fears, our lives. But what happens when that trust becomes twisted? When friendship transforms into something darker? When two people bound together decide that the rules don't apply to them? History is filled with cases where best friends didn't just break the law together. They killed together. They planned murders. They carried out unspeakable acts. And in many cases, they did it simply because they could. These aren't stories of enemies or strangers. These are stories of people who chose each other, who built their lives around each other, and who ultimately destroyed lives together. This is the dark side of friendship, the ultimate betrayal. Think about that. Before we explore these disturbing cases, if you're fascinated by the psychology behind criminal partnerships, subscribe and hit the notification bell. We cover true crime with factual accuracy and respect for victims. Drop a comment. Do you think having an accomplice makes someone more dangerous? Let's begin. Number 1. Leopold and Loeb, the crime of the century. 1924, Chicago. Two brilliant teenage boys from wealthy families. Nathan Leopold Jr., 19 years old, Richard Loeb, 18. Both were extraordinarily intelligent. Leopold had an IQ of 200, spoke 9 languages, and had already graduated from the University of Chicago with honors. He was planning to attend Harvard Law School. Loeb had graduated from college at 17 and was the youngest graduate in the history of the University of Michigan. They came from prominent Jewish families in Chicago's exclusive Kenwood neighborhood. They had everything: wealth, education, privilege, a bright future. But they wanted something else. They wanted to commit the perfect crime. Leopold and Loeb met as teenagers and quickly became inseparable. But their friendship was twisted from the start. They bonded over a shared belief in Friedrich Nietzsche's concept of the Superman, the idea that certain superior individuals are above the laws that govern ordinary people. They believed they were those superior individuals. They spent months planning. They wanted to prove they could kidnap and murder someone and get away with it completely. Not for money, not for revenge, simply for the intellectual thrill of it, to prove they were smart enough to beat the system. On May 21, 1924, they put their plan into action. They rented a car and drove around looking for a victim. They settled on 14-year-old Bobby Franks, a neighbor boy who knew Loeb from playing tennis at his house. Bobby was walking home from school when Loeb called him over to the car. Bobby got in. Within minutes, one of them struck Bobby in the head with a chisel while the other drove. They stuffed a rag with ether down his throat. Bobby died in the back seat. Leopold and Loeb drove to a remote area and stripped Bobby's body from the waist down. They poured hydrochloric acid on his face and genitals to make identification difficult. They stuffed his body into a drainage culvert. Then they went home and sent a ransom note to Bobby's father demanding $10,000. They actually thought they would get away with it. The next morning, a factory worker discovered Bobby's body. Police found a single clue at the scene: a pair of eyeglasses. The glasses had an unusual hinge mechanism that had only been sold to 3 people in Chicago. One of them was Nathan Leopold. When police questioned Leopold, he calmly explained that he must have dropped his glasses while birdwatching. But reporters discovered that the ransom note matched the typewriter Leopold used. His alibi fell apart. Within 10 days of the murder, both Leopold and Loeb confessed. They showed no remorse. They bragged about the crime to reporters. The trial became a national sensation. Leopold's father hired Clarence Darrow, the most famous defense attorney in America. Darrow knew his clients were guilty. His goal was to save them from the death penalty. He delivered a 12-hour closing argument against capital punishment. The judge was swayed. On September 10, 1924, both Leopold and Loeb were sentenced to life in prison plus 99 years. They maintained their friendship behind bars. Then, on January 28, 1936, Richard Loeb was attacked in the prison shower by another inmate. He was slashed more than 50 times with a razor. Nathan Leopold rushed to the hospital. Loeb died shortly after at 30 years old. Leopold would later say Loeb's friendship was terribly necessary to him, that his motive for the murder was to please Dick. Leopold served 34 years in prison. He was released in 1958 and died in 1971. Bobby Franks was 14 years old when his life was stolen by 2 boys who thought they were too smart to be caught. Number 2. Pauline Parker and Juliet Hume, New Zealand, 1954. 2 teenage girls who became obsessed with each other and murdered Pauline's mother when she tried to separate them. Pauline Parker was 16. Juliet Hume was 15. They met at Christ Church Girls High School and became best friends. But their friendship quickly became something more intense. They created an elaborate fantasy world together, writing stories about imaginary kingdoms and characters. They spent every moment together. They wrote letters filled with violent imagery and talk of death. They became so enmeshed in each other's lives that separation seemed impossible. In early 1954, Juliet's parents announced they were divorcing, and Juliet would be moving to South Africa with her mother. Pauline was devastated. She begged her mother, Honora Parker, to let her go with Juliet. Her mother refused. She was concerned about the unhealthy intensity of the girls' relationship. She wanted them apart. Pauline wrote in her diary that her mother was an obstacle, that she needed to be removed. The two girls began planning murder. On June 22, 1954, Pauline suggested the three of them take a walk in Victoria Park, a beautiful area in the hills above Christchurch. It was supposed to be one of the last outings before Juliet left New Zealand. They walked along a path. At a certain point, Pauline dropped a pink ornament her mother had just bought her. When her mother bent down to pick it up, Pauline struck her in the head with a brick inside a stocking. Juliet joined in. Together, the two girls bludgeoned Honora Parker to death. They hit her over 40 times. The attack was savage and prolonged. Covered in blood, the girls ran to a nearby tea kiosk. They claimed Pauline's mother had slipped and hit her head. But when staff went to investigate, they found Honora's body. The injuries were far too severe to be from a fall. Police discovered the bloody brick in a stocking hidden nearby. Within hours, both girls were arrested. Police found Pauline's diary. It detailed the entire murder plan. The entry for the day of the murder read, "The day of the happy event." The trial shocked New Zealand. The defense tried to argue insanity. The prosecution argued they knew exactly what they were doing. On August 28, 1954, the jury found both girls guilty of murder. Because they were under 18, they could not be sentenced to death. They were sentenced to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure. They served 5 years in separate prisons. Upon release, they were forbidden from ever contacting each other again. Juliet moved to England and became a successful crime novelist under the name Anne Perry. Pauline changed her name to Hilary Nathan and runs a children's writing school. The two women have never seen each other again. Honora Parker was 45 years old when her daughter and her daughter's best friend beat her to death with a brick. Number 3, Skylar Neese, Sheila Eddy, Rachel Schoaf, A Modern Tragedy, 2012, Star City, West Virginia. Skylar Neese was 16 years old. She was a bright, funny teenager who loved her friends. Two of her closest friends were Sheila Eddy and Rachel Schoaf. The three girls had been friends since elementary school. They did everything together: sleepovers, shopping, social media. They seemed inseparable. But behind the smiles in their photos, something was brewing. Sheila and Rachel had grown tired of Skylar. They found her annoying. They didn't want to be friends anymore, so they decided to kill her. On July 6, 2012, just after midnight, Skylar sneaked out of her bedroom window. Security cameras captured her getting into a car. She was never seen alive again. Sheila and Rachel drove Skylar to a remote area in Pennsylvania. They had brought knives. They had scouted the location. When they got to the spot, they told Skylar to count to 3. On 3, both girls attacked. They stabbed Skylar repeatedly. She fought back. She ran. They chased her down and kept stabbing. When it was over, Skylar Neese had been stabbed over 50 times. The two girls covered her body with branches and drove home. For months, Sheila and Rachel pretended to be devastated by Skylar's disappearance. They posted on social media about missing their best friend. They helped search for her. They comforted Skylar's parents, all while knowing exactly where Skylar's body was. Finally, in January 2013, Rachel Schoaf had a breakdown. She confessed. Rachel led investigators to Skylar's remains. When asked why they did it, Rachel gave an answer that chilled investigators. "We just didn't want to be friends with her anymore." That was it. No deep reason, no provocation. They simply didn't want to be her friend, so they killed her. Sheila Eddy and Rachel Schoaf were both charged with first-degree murder. Rachel pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Sheila was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Both are still incarcerated. Skylar Neese's parents pushed for Skylar's Law, which requires faster responses when teenagers go missing. Skylar was 16. She trusted her two best friends, and they murdered her because she was inconvenient. Number 4, Brian Draper, and Tori Adamczyk. The Scream Killers. 2006. Pocatello, Idaho. Two 16-year-old boys who idolized horror movies and decided to create their own real-life horror film. Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk were best friends. They were obsessed with the film Scream. They wanted to be famous. They wanted to commit the perfect murder just like in the movies. They chose their victim carefully. 16-year-old Cassie Jo Stoddart. She was a classmate who babysat for Tori's aunt and uncle. On September 22, 2006, Cassie was house-sitting. Brian and Tori came over. They hung out, watched movies, then they left. Cassie thought they went home. They didn't. They had unlocked a door. They had turned off the power. They waited in the dark. Before they killed her, Brian and Tori made a video. They recorded themselves talking about what they were about to do. They were giddy, excited. They called it their Scream movie. They broke back into the house. Cassie was alone, scared because the power was out. Brian and Tori attacked her with knives. They stabbed her 29 times. She tried to fight. She tried to run. They chased her through the house and kept stabbing. When it was over, they left her body and went to a movie theater. They acted normal, but they had made a critical mistake. The video. Police found the video where Brian and Tori talked about their plans. They found their DNA at the scene. Both boys were arrested. At trial, they showed no remorse. The jury saw the video. Two teenage boys planning a murder like it was a game. In 2007, both Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk were convicted of first-degree murder. They were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Cassie Jo Stoddart was 16 years old. She was killed by two boys she considered friends, boys who thought murder would make them famous. Number 5. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, Columbine. April 20th, 1999. Littleton, Colorado. The school shooting that changed America forever. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold were best friends. They bonded over their hatred of the popular kids at Columbine High School. They felt like outsiders, bullied, rejected. They decided the world needed to pay. For over a year, they planned an attack. They built bombs. They acquired guns. They made videos explaining their motivations. On April 20th, 1999, Eric and Dylan arrived at Columbine High School armed with guns and homemade bombs. They had planted propane bombs in the cafeteria, timed to explode during lunch. The bombs failed to detonate. Plan B was a shooting spree. They entered the school and began firing. They targeted the library where students were hiding. They taunted victims before killing them. The attack lasted 49 minutes. 12 students and 1 teacher were killed. 24 others were injured. Eric and Dylan then went to the library and killed themselves. The Columbine Massacre shocked the world. Investigators later determined that Eric Harris was likely a psychopath. He was the leader. Dylan Klebold was depressive and suicidal. He was the follower. Together they created something far more dangerous than either would have been alone. The victims of Columbine are remembered every year. Cassie Bernal, Stephen Curnow, Corey DePuter, Kelly Fleming, Matthew Kechter, Daniel Mauser, Daniel Rorbo, William Sanders, Rachel Scott, Isaiah Schulz, John Tomlin, Lauren Townsend, Kyle Velasquez. 13 lives stolen by two boys who called each other best friends. Number 6. Shanda Sharer, Melinda Loveless, Lori Tackett. 1992, Madison, Indiana. 4 teenage girls, a brutal murder driven by jealousy. Shanda Sharer was 12 years old. Melinda Loveless was 16. They knew each other because Shanda had briefly dated Melinda's ex-girlfriend. Melinda was obsessed with her ex. When she found out about Shanda, she became enraged. Melinda and her friend Lori Tackett, also 16, along with 2 other girls, Hope Rippey and Toni Lawrence, both 15, decided to kill Shanda. On January 11, 1992, the 4 girls convinced Shanda to sneak out of her house. They drove Shanda to a remote location. There, Melinda and Lori beat her. They tortured her for hours. They stabbed her. They strangled her. They poured gasoline on her and set her on fire while she was still alive. Shanda Sharer suffered unimaginable pain before she died. The 4 girls dumped her body in a field and went to McDonald's for breakfast. Within days, all 4 were arrested. Lori Tackett and Melinda Loveless were convicted of murder. Lori was sentenced to 60 years. Melinda was sentenced to 60 years. Hope Rippey and Toni Lawrence received lighter sentences. Melinda was released on parole in 2019 after serving 26 years. Lori remains in prison. Shanda Sharer was 12 years old. She was tortured and burned alive by 4 teenage girls. Her mother has spent decades advocating for victims' rights. Number 7. James Bulger, Robert Thompson, John Venables. February 12, 1993. Liverpool, England. One of the most horrifying cases in British history. 2 10-year-old boys abducted, tortured, and murdered a 2-year-old child. Robert Thompson and John Venables were both 10 years old. They were friends. Both came from troubled backgrounds. Both had histories of behavioral problems. On February 12, 1993, the 2 boys were skipping school. They wandered around the New Strand shopping center in Bootle. Security cameras captured them observing children, apparently selecting a target. They had already attempted to abduct another child earlier that day, but were stopped by the child's mother. Then they spotted 2-year-old James Bulger. His mother, Denise, was distracted for just a moment at a butcher shop. John Venables took James by the hand. Security footage shows the 3 of them leaving the mall, James walking between the 2 older boys. Shoppers noticed them. Some thought the boys were James's older brothers. Some saw that James was crying, but no one intervened. Thompson and Venables walked James over 2 miles through Liverpool. Passers-by saw James crying, saw him trying to run into traffic, saw the older boys pulling him back. People noticed, but they assumed the boys were his siblings. Thompson and Venables took James to a railway embankment in Walton. There they began their attack. They threw paint in James's face. They beat him with bricks and an iron bar. They kicked him. They stripped him from the waist down. They tortured him for an extended period. When they were finished, they left his mutilated body on the railway tracks, hoping a train would run over it and make it look like an accident. A train did pass over James's body, but he was already dead. 2 days later, on February 14th, James's body was discovered. The case shocked the United Kingdom. Police reviewed security footage and launched a massive investigation. An anonymous caller identified Thompson and Venables. Both boys were absent from school on the day of the murder. Police found blue paint on their clothing matching the paint found on James. They found blood on their shoes matching James's DNA. Both boys were arrested on February 20th, 1993. During interrogation, John Venables broke down and confessed. Robert Thompson refused to admit guilt, but the evidence was overwhelming. The trial began on November 1st, 1993. It was conducted as an adult trial. The boys sat on raised chairs so they could see over the dock. The evidence presented was horrifying. The pathologist detailed the extensive injuries James had suffered: brain damage, skull fractures, multiple blunt force trauma wounds. On November 24th, 1993, after deliberating for 6 hours, the jury found both boys guilty of murder. They became the youngest convicted murderers in modern British history. The judge called it an act of unparalleled evil and barbarity. Because they were under 18, they could not be sentenced to death. They were sentenced to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure. They served 8 years in youth detention. In June 2001, at age 18, both were released with new identities and lifelong anonymity orders. Robert Thompson has not reoffended since his release. John Venables has been sent back to prison twice. In 2010 and again in 2017 for possession of child abuse images. In December 2023, his parole was denied again. James Bulger was 2 years old. He trusted the hand that led him out of that shopping center. His mother, Denise Fergus, has spent decades fighting for justice and for changes to the system that released her son's killers. The image of little James holding John Venables' hand as they walked through the mall remains one of the most haunting pieces of footage in criminal history. Number 8. Charlie Wilkinson and Charles Wade. The Aaron Caffey case, 2008, Alba, Texas. 2 young men who became friends and together committed a family massacre. Charlie Wilkinson was 19. Charles Wade was 20. They were friends who shared an interest in violence and rebellion. Charlie was dating 16-year-old Aaron Caffey. Aaron's parents, Terry and Penny Caffey, didn't approve of the relationship. They thought Charlie was a bad influence. They forbade Aaron from seeing him. Aaron was furious. She wanted her parents gone. She convinced Charlie to kill her family. Charlie brought in his friend Charles Wade to help. They planned it carefully. On March 1st, 2008, just after 2 in the morning, Charlie Wilkinson and Charles Wade broke into the Caffey home. They were armed with guns and swords. Terry Caffey woke up to find armed men in his house. Charlie shot him multiple times. Terry survived by playing dead. Charlie and Charles then murdered Penny Caffey and Aaron's 2 younger brothers, 8-year-old Matthew and 13-year-old Tyler. They shot them. They stabbed them. After the murders, they set the house on fire to destroy evidence. Erin Caffey waited in the car outside while her boyfriend and his friend slaughtered her family. She didn't pull a trigger. She didn't wield a weapon. But it was her idea, her plan, her desire for revenge against parents who loved her and wanted to protect her. Terry Caffey survived the attack. Badly injured, he crawled out of the burning house. His wife and 2 young sons were dead. When police investigated, they quickly learned about Erin's relationship with Charlie. They learned about the breakup her parents had forced. They arrested Charlie Wilkinson, Charles Wade, and Erin Caffey. All 3 confessed. Charlie admitted he killed Erin's family because she wanted him to, because he loved her and wanted to please her. Charles Wade said he participated because Charlie was his friend. Erin showed no remorse. She was disappointed the plan hadn't worked perfectly, that her father had survived. In 2009, all 3 were convicted. Charlie Wilkinson was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Charles Wade was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Erin Caffey, despite being the mastermind, received 40 years because of her age. She will be eligible for parole in 2028. Terry Caffey lost his wife and 2 sons. He was shot 5 times. He survived only to learn his daughter orchestrated the murders. He has since forgiven Erin and visits her in prison. But Penny, Matthew, and Tyler Caffey are still gone, killed by 2 friends who chose loyalty to each other and to a manipulative teenage girl over human decency. Number 9. Viktor Sayenko and Igor Suprunyuk, the Dnipropetrovsk maniacs. 2007. Dnipropetrovsk, Ukraine. 2 19-year-old friends who went on a killing spree for fun and filmed their murders. Viktor Sayenko and Igor Suprunyuk had been friends since childhood. They came from middle-class families. They were not abused. They were not neglected. They simply enjoyed violence. In June 2007, they began their killing spree. Over the course of 1 month, they murdered at least 21 people. Their victims were random, homeless people, elderly individuals, anyone vulnerable. They used hammers, screwdrivers, and metal rods. They beat their victims to death. They tortured them, and they filmed it. They recorded their murders on a cell phone. They wanted to create a collection of snuff films, something they could watch and relive. One video became known as 3 Guys, 1 Hammer. It shows the murder of 48-year-old Sergei Yatsenko. The footage is among the most disturbing ever recorded. It shows Viktor and Igor torturing Yatsenko, beating him with a hammer, stabbing him with a screwdriver, all while he was still alive and conscious. They filmed his suffering. They laughed. The killing spree ended when the 2 friends were arrested in July 2007. Police found the videos on their phones. They found murder weapons in their possession. They found evidence linking them to multiple crime scenes. Both confessed. They showed no remorse. They described the murders as fun, as entertainment. At trial, prosecutors presented the horrific evidence, the videos, the testimonies of forensic experts, the photographs of victims. In February 2009, both Viktor Sayenko and Igor Suprunyuk were convicted of multiple counts of murder. Igor was sentenced to life in prison. Viktor was sentenced to life in prison. Both remain incarcerated in Ukraine. 21 people lost their lives to 2 childhood friends who decided killing was a hobby. Number 10. Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson. The Matthew Shepard murder. October 1998. Laramie, Wyoming. 2 men who called each other friends and together committed one of the most notorious hate crimes in American history. Aaron McKinney was 22. Russell Henderson was 21. They had been friends for years. On the night of October 6, 1998, they met 21-year-old Matthew Shepard at a bar. Matthew was a college student. He was gay and open about it. McKinney and Henderson pretended to be gay. They told Matthew they would give him a ride home. Instead, they drove him to a remote area. There, they robbed him. They beat him viciously with the butt of a pistol. They tied him to a fence and left him to die in near-freezing temperatures. Matthew was found 18 hours later by a cyclist who initially thought he was a scarecrow. He was rushed to the hospital but never regained consciousness. He died on October 12, 1998. The attack sparked national outrage. It became a symbol of violence against the LGBTQ community. Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson were arrested and charged with murder. At trial, McKinney's defense tried to use a gay panic defense, claiming he was provoked by Matthew's advances. The jury rejected it. Both men were convicted of felony murder. They were sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Matthew Shepard's mother, Judy Shepard, has become a prominent advocate for LGBTQ rights and hate crime legislation. In 2009, the Matthew Shepard Act was signed into law, expanding federal hate crime protections. Matthew was 21 years old. He was beaten, tortured, and left to die by two men who targeted him because of who he was. Two friends who together committed an act of pure hatred. These 10 cases span decades and continents, from Chicago in 1924 to Ukraine in 2007. Different eras, different countries, different circumstances, but the same dark pattern. Best friends who turned into killers, friends who radicalized each other, who convinced each other that murder was acceptable, that they were special, that the rules didn't apply to them. In many of these cases, experts believe neither person would have committed murder alone. It was the combination, the partnership, the shared delusion that made them dangerous. Leopold wrote that he killed to please Loeb. Rachel Schoaf said she and Sheila killed Skylar because they didn't want to be friends anymore. Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk wanted to be famous like the characters in Scream. Pauline Parker and Juliette Hume couldn't bear to be separated. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold fed each other's rage until it exploded. Erin Caffey convinced Charlie to slaughter her family. Victor and Igor turned murder into entertainment. Friendship is supposed to make us better. It's supposed to be about trust, loyalty, support. But in the wrong circumstances, with the wrong people, friendship can become something monstrous. Two people can convince each other that the unthinkable is acceptable, that murder is justified, that they can get away with it. The victims in these cases were often people who trusted their killers. Bobby Franks knew Richard Loeb. Honora Parker loved her daughter. Skylar Neese climbed out her window to meet her two best friends. Cassie Jo Stoddart invited Brian and Tori into the house. Matthew Shepard accepted a ride from two men he'd just met. 2-year-old James Bulger held the hand of a stranger who led him to his death. They trusted the wrong people, and that trust cost them their lives. If these cases disturbed you, showing how friendship can turn deadly, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. We cover true crime with factual accuracy and respect for victims. Drop a comment. Which case shocked you most? And what do you think makes two people more dangerous together than alone? Share this video with anyone interested in criminal psychology, because these stories, as horrifying as they are, teach us that the darkest crimes often come from the bonds we trust the most. Bobby Franks, Honora Parker, Skylar Neese, Cassie Jo Stoddart, the 13 victims of Columbine, Shanda Sharer, James Bulger, Penny, Matthew, and Tyler Caffey, the 21 victims in Ukraine, Matthew Shepard. They deserved better. They deserved friends they could trust. They deserved to live.